Now, from Washington, D.C., Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome to this Easter edition of The World Over Live. We've got a great show for you tonight, an encore of our recent stellar lineup. Presidential candidate Rick Santorum, House Budget Committee Chairman Paul Ryan, and Virginia Attorney General Ken Cuccinelli. But first, since it's Easter week, we thought it appropriate to bring you a brief overview of Pope Benedict's historic visit to Mexico and Cuba. From his meeting with children in Mexico to the closing Mass from Revolution Square in Havana, there was no shortage of great moments from this historic trip. Take a look.
Es una gran alegría recibirlo en tierra mexicana.
Ahora lo veo, lo siento muy dentro de corazón.
Santidad Benedicto XVI, México es y será siempre su casa. Gracias nuevamente.
This has really been an unbelievable visit in so many ways. Your enduring thoughts as you look back on what we've seen both in Mexico and now in Cuba?
Well, of course, a huge contrast.
Yeah.
The joy in Mexico and the festive environment. In Cuba, we saw in the faces of the people sadness, gloom. The plea of the Archbishop of Santiago, help us, Holy Father, help us. And then the Archbishop of Havana, talking about the Pope's visit and the meaning it had as a way to bridge the distances that separate Cubans and also bringing a message of hope. Yeah. So, but I think overall it has been a moment of great grace for the Church in Mexico, for the Church in Cuba, and for the Universal Church.
Yeah, the entire hemisphere.
Yeah, every time that we have the privilege of hearing Peter speaking to us, it's a moment of grace.
When we return, we'll talk with Republican candidate for president Rick Santorum about his campaign, his faith, and his Catholic problem. The World Over Live continues in a moment. Stay right there.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to The World Over. In the U.S., we're in the middle of the 2012 race for the presidency. My next guest is running second to Mitt Romney for the Republican nomination, but he's coming off strong showings in Louisiana, Alabama, and Mississippi. Can he still cinch this nomination? Here in an exclusive interview to talk about the state of the campaign is Rick Santorum. He joins us from Orange County, California. Hey, Rick, thanks for being with us.
How you doing? Thank you, Raymond. It's great to be with you, and I want to thank your friends down in Louisiana. They gave us a great victory about a week ago.
Hey, look, we know how to treat people down in Louisiana, and we feed you well as well.
Do.
Let's start with Rick. There's some reportage, and as I look at some of the exit poll numbers, you seem to have a Catholic problem. You're one of the most Catholic guys I know. You're out there demonstrating the faith. You defend the positions in public. Yet Catholics seem to be breaking for Romney. Why?
Well, that's a great question. I wish I could can answer that in any kind of coherent way. But you're right. I mean, we stand up and articulate my faith. I'm very forthright about that. And of course, if you look at the actions in my public policy and what I've done, everything from standing up for the institution of marriage and obviously the dignity of every human life, the work that I've done and trying to help those who are the least fortunate with programs that I did with everything from welfare reform to helping empower people through a lot of programs to bring, for example, money into inner city areas for entrepreneurship and as well as to try to strengthen the family with fatherhood, encouraging fatherhood programs through nonprofit institutions. So we've got a pretty solid record, and I wish I could tell you what the answer is, but we're just going to continue to go out there and articulate the message.
Yeah. Rick, I know faith is so central to your life. Tell me, in which way do you see it shaping this job you're running for now? Were you to win the presidency, how would your faith shape? Because you wrote a piece in 2008 where you said this doesn't only shape your character, it also shapes your policy. How would the faith shape your policies?
Well, I mean, it has certainly motivated me to be involved in public life. That's number one. The fact that you see what I consider to be injustice and problems that confront our world, and to go out there and to try to be salt and light, and that's what I've tried to do. As I mentioned before, I've been active on a lot of issues that are consonant with my Catholic faith, and felt motivated to fight those battles because, as you also know, Raymond, most politicians stay away from those very controversial, hot-button issues that are at the core of our moral enterprise that is America. And I've felt motivated by my faith to gauge those. Other people have obviously those opinions and beliefs. But I think that, to me, that it was the motivating part, the encouragement of going out there and being that salt and light that encouraged me to take on these issues.
Rick, you have shown and been that salt and light for so many during the debates. We certainly see it in the Facebook and the emails we've been getting here at the show. This weekend, there was a little pepper coming from Rick Santorum. I want to share this with the audience. This was a New York Times reporter asking you about something you said about Mitt Romney, that he was the worst guy you could put up against Barack Obama. Listen.
Quit distorting our words. If I see it, it's bull. Come on, man. What are you doing?
What happened there, Rick? Why do that? Why engage a reporter in that way? And does that show a lack of discipline?
Well, I had been asked that question twice previous in the last 2 minutes prior to that question, which of course isn't picked up on the film. It was characterized different ways by different reporters. This particular reporter said to me, "So Mitt Romney's the worst Republican." which was not anything that resembling what I said. What I said was that Mitt Romney was disqualified as the worst Republican to make the argument against Obamacare, which I stand by and believe that is true, since he was the author of the blueprint for Obamacare. And it was the the New York Times, and it's the typical hack job that the media has been doing over the past several weeks and months of taking things that I've said, taking them completely out of the context of what I'm saying, and then reporting them as if I've said these things. And at some point you stand up to this media that is doing doing things that are just simply not true, and sometimes you have to confront that with some force, and I did.
And the context of this was health care. Now, assuming, and it appears, Obamacare could well be struck down in the Supreme Court, what would be your plan going forward to provide access to people, to create that preferential option for the poor that is so at the center of your faith and mine? What would be Rick Santorum's health care plan? What would it look like?
Yeah, this is one of the advantages I have going into this race, is that I've never supported a government-run healthcare system, and I never supported a forcing of government to do things that are against your will. As you see, Raymond, from the support of many in the Catholic Church for government-run healthcare, when government says they can give you a right, they can also tell you how to exercise that right. When you provide the opportunity for people to go out and provide for themselves, then the government is not going to be in a position to force you to do things that may be against your economic interests, but just as importantly, as we've seen, against your moral and your moral values, which we've seen here under this administration. So our plan is very simple. It believes in 300 million consumers and giving them equal tax treatment, which is not the case right now. Equal tax treatment to go out and be able to purchase insurance on their own. Group insurance is not necessarily cheaper than individual insurance, particularly if you can buy that individual insurance in any state you want, which we can't under current law. Right. The idea that people can have what is called a refundable tax credit. So not just a reduction in your taxes to help you pay for insurance, but if you're low income enough that you don't pay taxes, it would be refundable. In other words, you would get a check from the federal government to help you pay if you do not have employer-provided insurance. So there's ways for us to get resources into the hands of people, give them the ability to be able to manage their health care affairs without involving the government and the intrusive nature of government in this field.
I want to move on to your primary opponent, Mitt Romney. The other day he was talking about his father, reminiscing and sort of laughing during a conference call. I'll play this little bite for the audience. I want you to react.
I have a few connections with the state of Wisconsin. One of the most humorous, I think, relates to my father. You may remember that my father, George Romney, was president of an automobile company called American Motors, and they made Ramblers and Jeeps. And they had a factory in Michigan, and they had a factory in Kenosha, Wisconsin, and another one in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And as the president of the company, he decided to close the factory in Michigan and move all the production to Wisconsin. Now, later, he decided to run for governor of Michigan. And so you can imagine that having closed the factory and moved all the production to Wisconsin was a very sensitive issue to him for his campaign. And I recall at one parade where he was going down the streets, he was led by a band, and they had a high school band that was leading each of the candidates. And his band did not know how to play the Michigan fight song. It only knew how to play the Wisconsin fight song. So every time they would start playing on Wisconsin, my dad's political people would jump up and down and try and get them to stop, because they didn't want people in Michigan to be reminded that my dad had moved production to Wisconsin.
What do you make of that? Is that, again, sort of a tone deafness on the part of Mitt Romney?
Well, I mean, I have to say that one of the issues that I think has been in our favor in this race is, I'm the son of an Italian immigrant. I grew up in a steel town, lived in government housing for all of my youth. Was someone that went to state universities and did what a lot of people in America have done, is sort of climb the ladder of success, and because America's created a great opportunity society. Governor Romney's had a different path. And I think it's reflected in the way he connects to people, or some would suggest lack of connectivity. And You know, we believe that people want to vote for someone that they feel understands them and has walked in their shoes, and that can reflect their values once they become president of the United States. And I think that's one of the reasons we're doing as well as we are, and I think one of the reasons Governor Romney is struggling.
Newt Gingrich, it appears, is out of money, yet he says he's going to stay in this race. He's going to try to go delegate by delegate to try to convince them to deprive Mitt Romney of their support. Is that a smart strategy, and is it time for him to get out of this race?
You know, Newt's a friend and someone who I've been in conversation with, and my sense is that he feels, as like many Republicans do, that nominating Governor Romney would not give us our best chance to be successful in the fall, and that we're looking for someone who presents a stronger and bolder contrast, someone who can make Obamacare, for example, the central issue in this campaign about robbing people of our freedoms, both religious, economic, as well as exploding the size and scale of government and harming the economy. It's a great encapsulation of the problems of this administration in one single bill, and as I've said, Governor Romney is uniquely disqualified to make that case. I think Newt understands that, and I think he is concerned that we are victorious and we want to put up the best person possible, and he's doing it his own way. I prefer the more traditional pattern, which is actually going out and winning votes and winning primaries, and that's what I'm doing.
So you all are in conversation. Do you expect him to support you, to come out and support you?
You know, I'd love his support. I'd love everybody's support. So, you know, we'll just do the best we can, and you know, we're going to stay on message and talk about the issues that are important to this country, and I'm hopeful that people will see that we need a Reagan-type conservative to run. The only one time in the last 100 years has a Republican ever defeated a Democratic incumbent for president. And we've run a bunch of moderates and lost, and we ran a conservative in Ronald Reagan in 1980, and we won. That should be the model, and it isn't right now for the establishment Republicans in this country.
We're talking to Rick Santorum. Rick, there was a report that you, Mitt Romney, Ron Paul, and Newt Gingrich had a meeting. I think it was before some forum several months ago. And there was a general agreement that no matter what happened, if there was a contested convention, it would be one of you four guys who made it to the end. Was there such an agreement and such a meeting?
Well, first off, Ron Paul wasn't at this forum. It was a Huckabee forum, and it was just sort of banter. Right, and literally the conversation lasted less than 30 seconds, and I didn't really contribute much to the conversation, candidly, but there was some banter about that. You know, the convention, as well as this election process, is going to work its way out. I can assure you I have absolutely no deals with anybody about anything. You know, we haven't been out recruiting the establishment or the endorsements. We've been out looking for average folks to come on our team and
So there was no agreement then between you all that one of you would be the ultimate nominee?
Not as far as I'm concerned, and you know, my feeling is that let the process work out, and let's make sure that we have the best nominee. And obviously, that's why I'm running, because I think we provide the best chance to win, and more importantly, not just win, but win with a way that we can actually make some huge changes in Washington to get this government under control and to restore freedom, opportunity, and a strong economy for our country.
Senator, we've been getting some emails, and I want to share this one question with the viewer's question for you. And they ask, you support a preemptive strike against Iran, given its nuclear capabilities now. In what way does that satisfy the requirements of the just war idea put forward by the church?
Well, you're looking at a country that has overtly threatened one country and indirectly, or in some cases directly, threatened many other countries with annihilation. The Iranian government has repeatedly said that Israel is a cancer, that it must be wiped off the face of the earth. They've talked specifically about targeting Jewish centers of population, and as you've seen, they have already actively engaged in two things. Number one, supporting terrorist organizations to do just that, including Syria, and they, as you know, annually hold Holocaust-denying conferences. in Tehran to deny the existence of even the reason for this, one of the reasons for the State of Israel. So you have a country that is very clear about what their intentions is and are very clear about, at least from my perspective, from what they're doing. Their intention is to develop a nuclear weapon and either use that weapon or use it as a shield to transform the world to a very, very dangerous place. And so what I have said is that I want to prevent a war. And preventing a war means denying Iran their nuclear capability. I have been working for the past 10 years to try to get support for the Persian people to overturn their government so this radical theocracy would not control a nuclear weapon, and have, again, been trying to prevent that war. I think now we may be in a position where the only way to prevent that war is to stop them from accomplishing what they want, which is a nuclear weapon, and specifically targeting those sites for degradation if, in fact, they won't shut them down unilaterally.
Senator Santorum, before I let you go, we're looking at recent polls in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin coming up. These are going to be big battlegrounds and moments for you to prove your candidacy. Pennsylvania is your home state. You were 45-16 on top of Romney in February. Now you're neck and neck. Do you expect to win Pennsylvania? And if you don't, can you stay in this race?
Well, we expect to win Pennsylvania, period. You know, these polls are going to bounce all over the place, and the pollster, that particular poll is, well, let's just say not known for his accuracy in polling. And so we're going to focus on what's in front of us right now, which is Wisconsin, and we're going to be in Pennsylvania next week, and we'll be spending a lot of time there. And I have no doubt that we're going to do well here in Wisconsin, and we're going to do very, very well in Pennsylvania. We'll win Pennsylvania, and we'll go forward. And the map after Pennsylvania, the map in May, is a very favorable map to us. We are ahead in almost every one of those states. There's 7 of them. We're ahead in almost every one of those states, and I think save one. And so this race has a long way to go yet.
And you think you'll get 74% of those delegates between now and the convention in Tampa?
Well, I don't know if we'll get 74% because the numbers that the media is using are frankly grossly overinflated. Our numbers are very, very different. We're only about 150 votes delegates behind, according to the numbers, which are more realistic with actual delegate counts as opposed to what are presumed delegate counts. And so this race is a lot closer than what people are portraying in the media, and we feel very comfortable that we can win in Tampa and represent and have a conservative representative, someone who can lead this country in a way that that is going to be very, very different than Barack Obama.
I want to get you on this while you brought him up just before I let you go. The president is saying oil subsidies, oil tax breaks should end. Rick Santorum's position is what?
Well, I'm against all oil subsidies as well as all energy subsidies. I think including what he is trying to do, which is to take subsidies away from oil and frankly, some things that are not even subsidies. Some of the things that he calls subsidies, frankly, are not subsidies. But there are a couple of tax credits that can be removed. But what we shouldn't be doing is doing what the president wants to do, which is take that money and pick some of his friends in the green energy community and put money there. What we should do is level the playing field, eliminate all subsidies for green energy as well as for traditional energy, and let the marketplace work. If that happens, I have no doubt that oil and gas production will dramatically improve, as well as coal and other types of sources of energy that are going to make our country more growth-oriented and create more jobs, not just in the energy sector, but with lower energy prices, stronger economic growth overall.
Very good. Senator Rick Santorum, best of luck on the campaign trail. We'll be following you.
Thank you very much, Raymond. I appreciate the opportunity.
We'll check in with you soon. You can get more information on the Santorum campaign at ricksantorum.com. Up next, the chairman of the House Budget Committee, Congressman Paul Ryan, is here to explain his budget, which just cleared the House. Stay tuned. The World Over Live continues in a moment.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to The World Over Live. With an eye on the fiscal crisis facing the United States, my next guest has long attempted to bring sanity to the budget process. Today, his budget plan, The Path to prosperity passed the House of Representatives, but not without some criticism. Joining us in studio to talk about the budget, the state of the U.S. economy, and the future is the chairman of the House Budget Committee, Congressman Paul Ryan of Wisconsin.
Hey,
Congressman, thanks for being here.
Great to be back with you, Ray.
Now, Paul, let's start with something you said. Promoting the natural rights and the inherent dignity of the individual must be the central focus of all government. How does your budget achieve that end?
So that is the founding ideal of this country. What we do is we take these principles, reapply them to the problems of the day to develop these solutions.
Okay.
And the principles we use are the dignity of the human person, the idea of subsidiarity. You know, as a Catholic, to me, the social magisterium and how we as lay, leaders in government apply these principles is sort of manifested in this budget. It is government that's local, giving government back to the states so we can customize programs to meet the needs of people.
Which is what subsidiarity is all about.
Which is subsidiary. Stopping a debt crisis.
Level.
We see a moral failing coming, which is if we have a debt crisis, the people who need government the most, the poor, the sick, the elderly, they get hurt the first and the worst under a debt crisis because then you're cutting indiscriminately and immediately. So what we want to do is take a system where we have the government giving all these empty promises to people, which if we have a debt crisis become broken promises. We want to secure these things like Medicare and Medicaid. We want to make sure that these programs can actually be counted on by the people who've organized their lives around them. And at the end of the day, what matters the most is prosperity and growth. We want to get people back to work. We want people onto lives of self-sufficiency. We want upward mobility, opportunity, local control of many aspects of their lives. Those things to us matter most. And if you apply those principles, you can get us out of debt.
Yeah, you're taking some heat. The bishops of the Episcopal Church and some, I'll say it, sort of left-of-center religious configurations have called this an immoral budget because, they claim, it treats the vulnerable and the poor in a terrible way and to their mind, gives the wealthy, those who have the most, tax breaks and subsidies, and that you're wrong for doing that. What do you say?
Couple things. First of all, we say get rid of the crony capitalism, get rid of the corporate welfare. Don't subsidize the wealthy. Don't subsidize the wealthy their health benefits. Don't subsidize wealthy corporations with handouts, with tax benefits. Get rid of the tax shelters and the loopholes so we can lower everybody's tax rates and get more economic growth and opportunity. That's point number one. Point number two is the goal to treat the symptoms of poverty to make poverty easier to live with? Then you just want to throw more money at the status quo. Or is the goal to address the root causes of poverty, to try and eradicate poverty, to try and break the cycle of poverty that is entrapping so many people and get people onto lives of self-sufficiency? That's what we think the safety net is all about. The safety net needs reforming because the safety net in many ways has been converted into a hammock that lulls people into lives of dependency and complacency. And so we saw success in welfare reform in the mid-90s.
Right.
But it only reformed one aspect of welfare. It didn't reform the other aspects of the safety net. And we want to replicate those successful reforms because where they're tried, they do so well to bring local control, get local government involved, and get people onto lives of self-sufficiency.
And how are you reforming them? Let's talk about what you're doing to food stamps, to Medicare. Nancy Pelosi today said, and I quote, "This ends the Medicare guarantee."
I'll tell you what, Ray, the status quo ends the Medicare guarantee because Medicare is going bankrupt. What the president's health care law does is it takes $500 billion from Medicare to spend on the new health care law, and then it puts a board of 15 unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats in charge of setting Medicare's prices, its rates, putting price controls in order to hit these targets, which will cut Medicare in ways that will deny care to seniors. And so look at what we're dealing with just the conscience issue. We are now saying for Medicare, 15 unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats will make all the decisions and run Medicare. Imagine what kind of decisions they'll make then when they're in control doing this in about a year's time if they're making these kinds of conscious decisions right now. We get rid of this board and we say, leave Medicare alone and keep it the way it is for today's seniors. They already retired. But in order to cash flow that commitment, you got to reform it for the next generation. And we propose reforms so it works like the program we have in Congress.
And that would be what, a voucher system for,
no, not
for
a
those
voucher
of us who
system.
are younger?
So you get a choice of guaranteed coverage options that Medicare that cannot be denied of you. You choose among these competing plans, including the traditional Medicare option, then Medicare subsidizes your premiums. More for the poor, more for the sick and the middle-income person, a lot less for the wealthy. Doing it that way, choice and competition, targeting support to where and who needs it most, saves Medicare, prevents it from going bankrupt, and allows us to cash flow the commitment to current seniors.
I want to show something to you. This is the president. He has recently put up a message to Planned Parenthood and its supporters. I'd like your reaction to this priority of the president. Listen.
When some professional politicians casually say that they'll get rid of Planned Parenthood, don't forget what they're really talking about. Eliminating the funding for preventive care that millions of women rely on and leaving them to fend for themselves. That's why last year, when Republicans in Congress threatened to shut down the government unless we stopped funding Planned Parenthood, I had a simple answer: no.
What's your reaction to that?
We've always said money is fungible. I don't think we should have federal funding to Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood funds abortions. When you take a look at the idea of preventative health care services, abortifacients, birth control, drugs, do we have a government now that gives us new rights which mandates that people who do not believe in these must consume them? Do we now have this point where the government must mandate to churches, charities, and hospitals and private citizens that they must violate their conscience and their religious liberty and their church teachings? Because this new idea of these government-granted rights trampling our constitutional rights
and conscience rights,
if that actually succeeds and is allowed to permit, then there's no limit to what the government can do. And this, to me, is very dangerous. And I'm really sort of puzzled that the president, if he's willing to do this in a difficult election year, imagine what he will do if he never has to face the voters again in implementing all the rest of this health care law. And so to me, it's really sort of stunning. And I just, for the life of me, can't understand why they're doing this, and obviously we're doing everything we can to fight it.
While we're on this topic, and then we'll get back to your budget, the health care law could very well come June be a thing of the past. The Supreme Court could simply rule against it. What would be the Paul Ryan solution to health care, to accessibility to health care and affordability? The president praised your plan several years ago when there was some heated back and forth, but initially he praised your idea. What would you propose?
Yeah, Senator Tom Coburn and I actually sent him a very comprehensive health care solution before his health care law. We didn't have much of a hearing on that. First of all, I would change the tax treatment of health care to finance refundable tax credits. Right now, the tax code gives the biggest subsidy to the people in the highest tax bracket and the smallest subsidy for health care to people in the lowest tax brackets. I would reverse that. Have refundable tax credits so that every American, no matter where they get health care from or if they don't get health care, gets a refundable credit to go toward purchasing health care. Then I would reform our insurance rules so you could buy insurance across state lines. Then I would finance risk pools to subsidize the care for the people with pre-existing conditions to make sure that they don't go poor or bankrupt if they get sick. These kinds of things, I think, can reconnect a patient-centered healthcare system where the individual patient is the nucleus of our healthcare system, not some distant bureaucrat telling you what you must have, what you must do, and how much you must pay for it. That, to me, doesn't work. It's going to bankrupt the healthcare system, and it violates our religious liberties.
Now, in your budget, Congressman, there are $1.2 trillion in unspecified cuts. Where does that money come from? So there is some concern that this will come out of the poor and the most vulnerable.
It's really, the unspecified part is what the CBO treats in the baseline. So what it is CBO did not know how to place some of their baseline adjustments, so that's in what we call that function. The other is the federal employees. We have an attrition policy where we reduce the federal workforce by 10% through attrition, and we require federal employees to pay for their half of their pension contributions, which they're not right now. And we have to put this in that what we call other allowances account because it's difficult to spread those savings throughout the government. So we've actually accounted for all of those specific savings, which are attributable towards CBO's technical changes and the changes to the federal employee pension contributions.
Now, the way this would affect people most directly is really the tax rate. I mean, all of these priorities will affect people, but the tax rate in particular is pretty revolutionary. 25% for upper income earners, 10%, essentially a flat tax for those who aren't in the upper income.
That's right.
Why isn't that getting the play that,
well,
that
first
you
of all,
expected it might?
We think it's going to grow the economy. We think it treats people fairly. If you take a look at tax shelters, it's people in the highest two tax bracket who get almost all of the tax shelters. And so we're saying take away the tax shelters, subject more of their income to taxation, but let's do it in a flatter, fair, simpler way. And we believe that it's going to help create jobs. The reason I say that is 8 out of 10 businesses in America, they don't file their taxes as corporations. They file their taxes as individuals. They're called like subchapter S corporations or partnerships. 9 out of 10 in Wisconsin file their taxes that way. And so that's really the tax system that taxes small businesses. And in January, the president is proposing their top tax rate goes to 44.8%. How can successful small businesses, which create more than half our jobs in America, compete when they're taxed at 45%, when their competitors in Canada are at 15%, and Ireland at 12.5%, and China are at 25%? We think that's a job killer. So we think this helps create jobs, economic growth, and prosperity. And again, going back to, you know, the social magisterium, the idea here is prosperity, upward mobility, opportunity, and that's what we think we're achieving with these policies.
Now, even the U.S. bishops have said you should look more closely at defense cuts, and they, you know, they were asking for preservation of Pell Grants and health care and food stamp programs. Why not include defense?
Oh, we did.
cuts?
We took $300 billion out of the defense budget.
Where'd that come out?
So that comes off of the
came out
defense
of
base.
Diplomacy and those things.
No,
that
the defense is function 50.
Okay.
I mean, I won't get into the budget wonk.
Okay.
No, out of the Defense Department.
Okay.
From their budget from last year, we took $300 billion out of it. So we do think that there's waste there and there's efficiencies to be gotten. We also just want to make sure that since this is the first priority of the federal government, the first function, we don't want to shortchange our sailors, soldiers, airmen, and Marines. And we're worried if we reduce end strength too much, we're going to put too much stress on the Guard and the reserves, and we want to be mindful of that.
Now, when I looked at this plan and read through it, and I did it fairly carefully and compared it to Mitt Romney's plan, they're very close.
Very close.
Very close.
Very close.
If you get a phone call tomorrow from Mitt Romney and it says, I'd like you to be my running mate, you say what?
I thought you were going to say, if you get a phone call, I'd like you to get this budget through. All right.
I know you'll do that.
Yeah, so
but what about running as a running mate?
I don't know the answer to your question. I'm not giving it any serious thought. I'm busy doing my job in Congress. Congress is important in all of this.
Because you could push a budget as a running mate, couldn't you? As a VP?
It's just not something I've given any serious thought to. It's someone else's decision a long time from now, and I'm focused on doing my job.
Okay, very good. Well, we'll be watching you do it.
All right.
Congressman Paul Ryan, thanks so
Ray.
much for
Appreciate
coming
it.
in, and we'll be following the progress of this budget. What do you think? You think it's going anywhere in the Senate?
They already announced they're not going to do a budget for the third year in a row in the Senate.
Unbelievable. Well, we'll still follow what you're doing. Up next, we'll discuss the oral arguments over Obamacare before the Supreme Court with Virginia Attorney General Ken Cuccinelli. The World Over Live continues in a moment. Stay right there.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to The World Over Live. The Supreme Court heard oral arguments about the Obama administration's health care law this week. Over 3 days, various dimensions of the bill were considered, or the law. What decision could the court hand down in June, given this week's discussion? My next guest represents one of the 26 states suing the federal government over the health care law and was in the Supreme Court chambers during the arguments. Please welcome the Attorney General of the state of Virginia and recently announced gubernatorial candidate Ken Cuccinelli. Great to have you here, Mr. Attorney General. Let's start with, what was the complaint? From the state of Virginia's perspective, what was your outrage over this bill that you took the federal government to court?
The states here sued to protect the Constitution from the federal government. That's what we were doing. This is federalism in action. And the central complaint was that the individual mandate, first of all, goes well beyond the power of the federal government to regulate commerce, because that's the power they were operating under. A lot of people talk about it as a 10th Amendment case. It was not a 10th Amendment case. It was a Commerce Clause case. And this has never before occurred in our history, that the federal government has ordered our citizens to buy a product under the guise of regulating commerce. And that was recognized by several of the justices as truly unique.
Now, tell me what surprised you most as you sat in those chambers and you watched these arguments. I mean, at moments it got very heated. There was a lot of engagement between the justices and the various representatives here. What did you
certainly
see that
what
surprised
we
you?
litigators would call a hot bench, and sometimes stepping over each other, as they're also famous for doing, and teasing one another across the bench. But it is unusual, first of all, to have a case go longer than 1 hour. And so people need to realize just how
extraordinary
outside the box this was. They haven't set this much time aside for a case in 47 years. So that wiped out argument number one of the federal government, which was they've walked into courts and said, oh, it's no big deal here, nothing much going on. It's just an ordinary law. You really should just set aside this complaint. Well, when they set 5.5 hours of argument time, they clearly disposed of that attempt by the federal
And that
government.
was day one. They were trying to suggest that until the penalty is paid, you can't take the government to court. And that was dismissed.
I think it's very clear that the Anti-Injunction Act, which was the focus of day one, will not bar consideration of the case, and they will get to the constitutionality of the mandate. And what I saw in the courtroom on Tuesday, which is when we argued the mandate for 2 hours, was that the votes are there to overturn that mandate, and rather surprisingly so in terms of its clarity.
Now, Justice Kagan said that very first day, she asked if a person declined to buy insurance but paid the penalty, would they be in violation of federal law? What'd you think of that
I thought it was a nice, simple question, and the Solicitor General, somewhat shockingly, I mean, I did sort of one of these, really? He said, no, it wouldn't be a violation of the law to not do what the law commands, and that is buy the required insurance. You know, I don't know whether if I'm filling out one of those forms where it's a felony if you don't tell the truth, whether I'm ready to risk that on the Solicitor General's word that, oh, no, that won't be breaking the law. Really, just because you don't obey the law.
The federal law. Yeah. Very odd. Yeah,
it was odd, but, you know, the inconsistencies that the federal government has to live with to prevail in this case and to convince the justices to live with to prevail in this case are numerous. That was one on Monday. Another one was Justice Alito said, you know, you're here today telling us this isn't a tax for purposes of the Anti-Injunction Act, but you're going to come back here tomorrow and you're going to argue to us that this is a tax.
To get around the individual mandate.
That's right. Which is it? And again, the inconsistencies necessary to be maintained for this, for the federal government to prevail in this case, are just too many to count.
Let's talk about day two. This was the real heart of the bill. The individual mandate, compelling individuals to buy insurance. I want to play a little bite. This is Justice Kennedy asking a question. Listen to this.
Can you create commerce in order to regulate it?
That's not what's going on here, Justice Kennedy, and we're not seeking to defend the law on that basis. In this case, what is being regulated is the method of financing the purchase of health care.
What did you make of that?
First of all, that was, for folks who weren't there, that was the first question out of the box for the day. And Justice Kennedy asked, can you compel people into commerce in order to regulate it? The use of the word compel and his structuring of that, and then the dodge, that was a dodge by the Solicitor General, an attempt to avoid that characterization. And you can't draw too much from questions, but it does sound like the Justice thinks that compulsion is what's happening here, and that was confirmed later when he said, this is unique, the affirmative requirement is unique, and will change the relationship between the government and individuals in a fundamental way, his words, fundamental way. That suggests that that first question was a characterization of his view of what's going on. But even Justice Scalia attempted to frame this, if you will, as allowed the possibility that this may be a unique market. Listen to this little excerpt.
If I'm in any market at all, my failure to purchase something in that market subjects me to regulation.
No, that's not our position at all, Justice Scalia. In the healthcare market, the healthcare market is characterized by the fact that, aside from the few groups that Congress chose to exempt from the minimum coverage requirement, those who for religious reasons don't participate, those who are incarcerated, Indian tribes, virtually everybody else is either in that market or will be in that market. And the distinguishing feature of that is that people cannot generally control when they enter that market.
There you had that back and forth, and they talked about some of the religious exemptions there that had been carved out in the bill, while you deny entire other religious groups, like the Catholic Church, any exemption at all. That's right, and not only that, it almost amounts to a crackdown when you look at what I call the son of mandate, the HHS mandate, that all these Catholic and other institutions, it's not just Catholic, have to essentially finance contraception, sterilization, morning after abortion type of pills and medications. That is consistent with this administration's
disregard for faith. I mean, look at the Tabor case was decided 9-0.
Yeah.
This is the Lutherans. This is the first they come for
But
the
that's not
Lutherans,
really
then they come for the Catholics.
But that's not really being considered here, is it, Ken?
No, but
the religious dimension,
yes,
religious liberty.
But this case is not about health care. It's about liberty. For this legislation to work, even nearly as intended, requires the destruction of massive swaths of the liberty of the people of this country. And I reference the son of mandate because so many people reacted, oh my gosh, this is terrible, this is awful. Well, guess what? There's more coming. There's more coming. Wait till you hear about the restrictions on your choices that come from the 15-member body that gets to decide what health care you get.
Yeah, this is just, I mean, there's 123 rules
it's a liberty
that Kathleen Sebelius has yet to write.
Yes.
I mean, it really is breathtaking. But there again, just to tap into what we heard, they do seem to be talking about a unique market. Is that a concern for you? If the justices believe
the federal
this is
government's
unique?
biggest challenge coming in this week was to somehow characterize the market that they were compelling people into as unique. And you heard part of the Solicitor General's attempt to do that there. He said, you don't know when you're going to incur these costs. The second element that he said was, and those costs, if you don't pay them, get shifted to others, driving up the cost of health care. And that's when Justice Alito came up with what I thought was the second funniest thing in the whole 3 days. And that was, he said, well, what about burial services? I can rather suddenly need to be buried, and I may not have prepared for that. And it's not cheap. If I can't afford it, other people are going to pay for it. Boom, blown out of the water, right out of the box. And no pun intended on the box.
Yeah, that's right.
But, and the Chief Justice came up with his own example of emergency services. The Solicitor General and really the federal government were simply unable to give any principled explanation for why they think, even why they think, much less why the court should think, why they think that this health care market, as they might try to define it, and Justice Scalia was arguing over what is the market, is unique. I mean, we need food. We need food more than we need health care.
Yeah. Cell phones came up at one point.
Cell phones came up, yes, that was part of it, the Chief Justice. I mean, they have utterly failed in all the courts of the land to distinguish the health care market or the health insurance market, as Justice Scalia noted. You're not regulating health care, you're regulating insurance. Right. Because that's what the mandate is.
But only one of the lower courts knocked out and said that this was invalid and not constitutional, correct?
No. Richmond, we had it. We were the first state to beat it in Richmond in December. In Florida, they beat it.
Okay, I thought it was
in the 11th Circuit, where the Florida case came up through, which is the one the Supreme Court heard, they held the mandate unconstitutional.
But not the whole law. They carved out the law.
Only Judge Vinson in the district court in Florida threw the whole law out. But the 11th Circuit, frankly, as did the district court in Virginia, I think just messed that up. All they took out effectively was the mandate itself. And even the federal government concedes the whole system will crash.
Well, that brings us to the third day, which was about severability, breaking off this individual mandate. If the individual mandate is considered not constitutional, do you just strike the whole law? Right. Or do you go and cherry pick and start cutting it up? Justice Scalia said, well, am I supposed to read all 2,700 pages of this thing? What did you take from that?
Which led to the funniest thing in 3 days, his allusion to the Eighth Amendment, which for your viewers is about cruel and unusual punishment. Are you going to make me read this 2,700 pages? And there was some joking back and forth on the bench, Justice Kagan sort of teasing him about how lazy he was. He said, of course I'm lazy. I don't care how hard my clerks have to work. I care how hard I have to work.
Yeah, and he didn't read this.
That was pretty funny. But
what did you take from that exchange?
Well, from that point, I drew the conclusion that, first of all, Justice Scalia is probably starting with a position of all or nothing. And nothing means the mandate and the private insurance pieces that even the federal government has conceded have to go if the mandate is unconstitutional. I think he will jump from there to the whole bill. And I heard comments like that from Justice Kennedy, who challenged Ed Needler for the federal government. He said, you know, you've characterized the more deferential step by the court, meaning deference to Congress, a co-equal branch of government, as being carving out just some chunk of this law. I would suggest to you that maybe the opposite is true, and that it is more deferential to take the whole law, because if you take a piece of it, you end up with consequences for insurance companies that were never contemplated
You'll bankrupt
and
the
never
insurance
intended
companies.
by the Congress, as well as all sorts of other consequences that Congress never intended. Let's give it back to them and let them start over. That's more deferential.
Yeah, otherwise, the justices are really legislating from the bench in that sense.
Well, and that's they were all trying to avoid that characterization, all of them. And some of them said to avoid it, you do as little as possible. And others seemed to take the position to avoid that, you knock the whole thing out and then start over. And Justice Scalia said, have we ever taken the heart out of a bill and let the rest of the bill stand?
Yeah.
And there really wasn't a good answer from the federal government.
Okay, what's your gut on this as a professional, as the Attorney General of Virginia? You look at this, you listen to these arguments, where do you think it'll come down?
You know, I've been briefing this case for 2 years, and I have been cautiously optimistic all along, but never any more than that. I will say that when I came out of the hearing on Tuesday, after the 2 hours of argument on the individual mandate, that's the first time the needle moved for me in 2 years, and I got a bit more optimistic because I saw that 5 votes could be there to hold the mandate unconstitutional, and I drew the same conclusion on Wednesday in a much more unpredictable hearing on the severance, which is about the remedy. If we find this mandate unconstitutional, now what do we do?
What do we do? Yeah.
There's not a lot of track record for these justices to look back on to see what they've done in other circumstances.
How the Supreme Court has done in the past.
And Justice Scalia said, you know, it's a case of first impression, which is lawyerese for, we've never seen one like this before.
Yeah.
And I saw 5 votes there, too, possibly,
to strike the whole law.
To strike the whole law.
Okay, we will hold you to that and revisit you in June.
Don't hold me to that.
Ken Cuccinelli, thanks so much for
My
coming.
pleasure.
And we'll have you back again.
All right.
That is all the time we have, but the show continues on Facebook and Twitter. Go to RaymondArroyo.com. The Twitter and Facebook pages are linked on the left-hand side of the site. There you'll find the latest news, some commentary, and things you won't find anywhere else. Don't forget about our Mother Angelica's stories. You can send those to Raymond at RaymondArroyo.com. Until next week, we'll be scouting the world over for all that is seen and unseen. On behalf of the staff and crew of EWTN News, I'm Raymond Arroyo. Thanks for watching. Have a great Holy Week and a happy Easter. We'll see you next time. Bye now.